let me take a little poll here. Those of you who joined our Simul Academy this month, this October, please raise your hands. Very good, most of you. Very good. How many of you have been here since last year or earlier? Yeah, this year. No, I mean last year. Last year. All right. But I'm glad to see so many of you who joined this month to come to hear my lecture. I suppose to most of you this is the first time. On the other hand, may I also take a poll? Those of you who heard my lecture, like either here or in other places, public lectures, please raise your hand. Thank you. Not really very many. That's all right. So I can maybe tell you some of the same old stories and still get the good laugh. I came back last Thursday night. Yasuda-san, can you do something about this? I came back from Cancan last Thursday night. As you know, the Prime Minister and his party came back Tuesday night. I returned here 48 hours later because I left the party in Cancun and went on my own trip for 2 additional days. You probably were following this whole story in the newspapers. That they left here a week ago Tuesday and arrived at Seattle, Washington the same day, stayed there overnight, and flew next day, which was Wednesday, to Cancun. Seattle to Cancun, flying over the Rocky Mountains and over the city of Houston, Texas. The summit meeting itself was for 2 days, last Thursday and Friday. The party left Cancun Saturday morning and flew non-stop to Portland, Oregon for an overnight stay. They left Portland Sunday morning, flew non-stop to Haneda, not Narita. Now that's one thing nice about these prime ministers' chartered planes. They take off from Haneda and they come back to Haneda. And I think they came back here Tuesday night. The reason I didn't come back with them was that I wanted to go to Salt Lake City, Utah, to attend a convention, an international conference. To attend, I said, as a delegate, as actually one of the only 2 delegates from Japan. It was an annual General Assembly of an international Congress and Convention Association. It is an association made up of people or firms interested in promoting international conferences, to create conferences, to organize conferences, to service or serve conferences. They are, for example, conference centers, like Kyoto International Conference Hall. And no representative came from there. And the Philippine International Conference Center, for example. There's one in Berlin, Germany, a huge Congress Platz, I think that's what they call it. And also members are airlines, national tourism promotion organizations like JNTO, Japan National Tourist Organization, 国際観光振興会. Congress organizers like Simon International. Oh yes, there was a man from Kyoto International Conference Center. Yes, he and I were the only two from Japan. It was nice because it was one conference. I didn't have to do a thing. I didn't have to work. I wasn't interpreting. There was no interpreting. Everybody spoke English. That's bad. We need conferences that need our interpretive services. But there, the conference was going on for 6 or 7 days, starting Saturday night and going on until next Friday. I went there late Saturday night just to be in the conference over the weekend. Sunday morning there was an opening ceremony in the famous Mormon Tabernacle. Any of you heard about the Mormon Tabernacle in Salt Lake City? The Mormon, that is so-called Mormon. Tabernacle is a kind of cathedral. The Mormon church, the Mormon is a popular name for this particular sect of Protestant Christianity called the Church of Jesus. What was it? Church of Latter-day Saints? The Church of, what was the full name? Has to do something with the Latter-day Saints. Anyway, it's popularly called the Mormon. In the Mormon Tabernacle, they have a very good, world-famous choir. It's called the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. Some 300 people, men and women, sing the hymns and other songs. And all the delegates, about 300 delegates to this International Congress and Convention Association went there to listen to the choir. By the way, do you know the difference between Congress and Convention? The differences aren't really very much. But there are words like Congress, Convention, and Conference. Conference is any conference. Two people can make up a conference, right? Congress sounds more academic, scientific, like gakkai. Convention is very far from any academic connotation. It does not sound academic. It doesn't sound very nice, actually. Convention is like 業界の集まり. If all the ramen vendors in Minatoku get together for monthly meeting, it's a convention. But if doctors, like neurologists, meet in Kyoto once a year, it's not called a convention. No. Convention is a 業者大会, something like that. Therefore, this organization, desiring to cover all types of conferences, picked up the two extremes, the most academic and distinguished sounding name, and the most popular, I can use more adjectives, but let me not, popular types of conferences to cover everything, International Congress and Convention Association. So this is called ICA. And as I said, the working language was English. Here we are. And I didn't know, there was no interpreters. And I didn't have to present any paper. I did not have to talk. So it's just nice. For a change, I could fall asleep if I wanted to. But it was too exciting to sleep. I got there late Saturday night, and Sunday morning there was Mormon Tabernacle Choir, which was beautiful, and besides it was short, about 45 minutes. And I didn't fall asleep. In fact, I was tape recording the music. And it's a long story, but I had lost my luggage. I don't know why these things happen in the days of modern technology, with all the sophisticated machines they make to fly us from one place to another or all over the world. People still manage to lose your luggage. When I attended this ICA General Assembly 5 years ago in Nice, France, I was interpreting for one conference in Madras, India, the Japan-India Businessmen's Conference. I flew Lufthansa. I flew Air India from Madras to New Delhi and took Lufthansa to Frankfurt and changed to another Lufthansa to Nice. No, it was Air France. That's why. When you change from one airline to another, there are more possibilities, more chances of your luggage getting lost. They call it interline transfers between one line and another. When I arrived at Nice, I didn't have luggage, so I had to sleep one night without pajamas, which does not make me Marilyn Monroe. But next day it came. Same thing happened. Again, attending ICA convention in Salt Lake City. Somewhere between Cancun and Salt Lake City, the airlines managed to lose my luggage, 2 of them. In fact, they lost luggage for about half a dozen people. I flew from Cancun to New Orleans by Eastern Airlines, very short, 1 hour and a half, over the Gulf of Mexico. The plane was late. You know why? Because many VIPs, the dignitaries, were leaving from Cancun every 30 minutes, so that the president of Mexico, the United Mexican States, they call it formally, President Jose Lopez. What's Jose Lopez? What was his last name? Portillo. Jose Lopez Portillo would be able to go to the airport. He stayed at the airport all day long, and he sends one head of state or government off and salutes and go back and have a cup of tea or tequila, whatever, and goes out and sends another. So every 10-15 minutes, these dignitaries were leaving the airport. In the meantime, private airlines were delayed. Every now and then, between these VIP flights, the control tower would let 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 commercial airliners take off. Anyway, my Eastern Airlines flight was late by half an hour. I was very worried because I had only 1 hour of connecting time in New Orleans to transfer to Continental Airlines to fly from New Orleans to Salt Lake City, stopping at Denver, Colorado. Well, the plane was late, but there is a famous airline law. This is not written anywhere. It's one of these silly, humorous rules or laws. You know about Murphy's Law and Parkinson's Law and so on. The airline law states, if the plane you are on is late, the plane you want to connect to will never be late. You follow me? If your plane is late, the one you want to connect to, it's never late. They take off on time. Surely, this time, even though Eastern was late by half an hour, Continental was taking off on time. So I had only 30 minutes to reclaim my bags, clear them through customs, 通関ね, clear them through customs. I said I have nothing to declare, nothing. And tell the airline people to please put them on this continental flight. By the way, in America, Americans say continental. They don't pronounce it continental, they say continental. It's hard for me to say it anymore. When I was living in the United States, I used to say continental. But now that I am a professional interpreter and I interpret for people of many nations speaking different languages, I try to be clear. So I never say continental anymore. I say continental. And often Americans say, what? Then being a very nice man, I compromise, I say continental. So the luggage may have been left at the New Orleans airport, but I think it probably was left at Denver airport, because when I arrived at Denver, to my great surprise, there was a snowstorm, fubuki, blizzard, real bad snowstorm. You couldn't see anything. And there were inches of snow on the wings of airplanes at the airport. And they had to bring some machine to blow the snow off to permit the planes to take off. And there was some problem with the equipment, and they use the term equipment, meaning the airplane. 機材の故障, as they say in the airline jargon. So we were told to transfer to another plane. They transferred all the passengers, but they probably failed to transfer some of the luggage. And departure was late by almost 1 hour. So when I arrived at Salt Lake City, it was just about midnight. And 3 dozen people got off there. And when this conveyor stopped, and there was no more luggage coming down, there were about 6 of us left without luggage. But these things make your traveling interesting. I can say it's interesting now that it's over, and now that I found my luggage. You meet interesting people. This Continental Airlines didn't even have an office at the airport. Some airline called, I forgot the name, not the Pacific, some strange name I had never heard before, was an agent for Continental Airlines. And they were receiving claims or report for lost luggage. And there was a man, and there was a line, 3 or 4 people. I was second from the last. And anyway, I filled in the report. The man was actually very nice. And after he asked my name, I said Muramatsu, and I spelled it M-U-R-A-M-A-T-S-U. He wrote it down. And as he was saying, now what kind of luggage was it? Can you point to the shape? They had pictures of many luggage. Have you, anyone of you ever lost luggage in traveling? Yes, you know the report form you have to file. Pictures of various types of luggage, and you say, this is it. You circle the picture of the luggage of your shape. And he said, as he was talking, he said, Matsumura, Mr. Matsumura. I said, no, Muramatsu. He said, I'm sorry. I knew then he understood some Japanese, because only those people who know something about Japan or Japanese language make that kind of mistake, right? So I said, you must know about language. He said, well, actually, I was in Japan for a few years, some years. Well, anyway, he was very helpful. But from between that point on until next, in the evening of the next day, I had to call this place many, many times. But people were all very nice. There were other people working on rotation. Everybody was very kind, very helpful, tried to comfort me. But I still wonder why they cannot stop that kind of mishaps. Because it costs those airlines a lot of money to try to trace them by telex or telegram all over the continent. Actually, they do it. And since the so-called airline code, the city code for Salt Lake City was SLC, you know, all the airports in the world have this code made up of 3 letters. San Francisco, for example, is SFO. Los Angeles is LAX. This is for Salt Lake City. But that plane goes from Salt Lake City to San Jose and San Francisco. The code for San Jose is, by the way, it's a Spanish name, San Jose. It should be pronounced San Jose. Most Americans say San Jose. But about 15, 16 years ago, the city council, 市議会 of that city, solemnly decreed or decided that our city should be pronounced San Jose. So its official pronunciation is San Jose. Anyway, the code for San Jose is SJC. And these people explained to me, very often people make a mistake and set the luggage onto San Jose. That may have been the reason. Anyway, they came back next evening. It was a great relief for me. So again, the first night, I had to sleep without pajama. But the weekend stay in Salt Lake City itself was most enjoyable. Because as I said, there was no work. I had no obligation. After the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, we were taken by about 5 big buses to sightseeing tour of the scenic areas around Salt Lake City and in the mountains. And we took a steam engine train ride, locomotive, good old-fashioned Western locomotive, choo-choo train, into the valley called Heber Valley, Heber Creek or Heber Valley. And the train, which was very slow, barely faster than you were jogging. The train was called the Heber Creeper. How? It was just as slow as creeping, Heber Creeper. The ride was a lot of fun, and then at the end there were some entertainments on the way. The gunmen, the highway robbers, the bad guys in black suits and guns come out and try to rob the train, and there's a sheriff on the train, and they stage a mock fight, and of course the sheriff wins. And in the meantime, a lot of cameras click, and at the end of the line there's an old-fashioned Western mining town, a kind of ghost town, and there are bars, saloons, souvenir shops, and then we had Western-style barbecue dinner with a lot of entertainment, a lot of singing. So we all came home full and tired and sleepy. And then what a great relief it was to find my luggage in my room. And I telephoned this airline office to thank them. And I said, I really appreciated your courtesy, kindness in looking after my luggage. But if you have a minute, I'd like to ask a question. Seriously, I'm interested in learning why these things have to happen. With all your advance, I said, in hardware, the art of flying airplanes, how come these silly things happen? Can't you, for example, make those tags and the strings a little stronger? You know, tags get lost, they get ripped off. And they do lose luggage that way too. Well, the man was very apologetic. It was very nice. So I decided not to pursue this any further. So after the 2 nights in Salt Lake City, I flew to San Francisco, met many of my Japanese and American friends there, and flew Japan Airlines flight number 1 nonstop to Tokyo. That's why I was late in coming back to Tokyo by 48 hours. Later, after I came back to Tokyo, I learned that the Prime Minister's plane was not able to land at Anchorage because of, was it a snowstorm or typhoon? Or no, not typhoon, fog, because of fog. And the plane had to land at Fairbank, right. And there was no food and there was no relief crew because they had to change the crew. Flying from Cancun to Portland and Portland to Anchorage was long enough, and according to the agreement between the airlines and the airline unions, naturally the crew had to get off and new crew had to get on, and new crew was waiting at Anchorage. So was the food was waiting, and fortunately they were able to take off from Anchorage. So the Japan Airlines hired some small airplane, put all the crew. No, it wasn't small. It was 727. So it was a big 4-engine jet. They flew the crew and the Japanese food from Anchorage to Fairbank. In the meantime, for about 4 hours, 5 hours, the Prime Minister party was without any food. So I missed that tragic experience. Now, let's so much about travelogue. Do you know the word travelogue? Travelogue. It's a made-up word between travel and dialogue or monologue. Travelogue is 旅の物語、旅行物語. So I've been telling you about the travel itself, not about the Cancan Summit. This is a poster I bought in Cancun, and this actually is about 10-20 miles away from the village of Cancun. What looks like a medieval castle is actually a ruin, haiko, of ancient Mayan civilization, Maya文明. Actually, I didn't see it. If you would picture North America, say Peninsula of Florida here, Gulf of Mexico, and this is Lower California or Baja California, there's Mexico, and somehow there's this Central America and then South America. My map is bad, but this is Yucatan Peninsula, the area of ancient Mayan civilization, Maya. This is where Cancun is, the northern tip of Yucatan Peninsula. So you see, to fly from here to New Orleans was very short. New Orleans to Denver, Salt Lake City, and San Francisco. The village of Cancun, it actually is a village, was a tiny village of only about 200, 300 Mayan fishermen until 5-6 years ago. The government of Mexico chose this village to be developed as an international resort like Acapulco. You heard about Acapulco. Acapulco is somewhere around here. The climate is perfect. Very little rain. It is hot, but not too humid, and a lot of breeze. And this is the map of Cancun. This part is really the northern tip of that Yucatan Peninsula. And you see the long sandy strip. This is all white sand. And the resort, this is the village of Cancun. Airport is around here. And there's a road. And all the hotels are here. The conference itself, the Cancan Summit, took place in the Sheraton Hotel. And that is somewhere around here. And the most senior Japanese delegates, like Prime Minister, Foreign Minister, and Minister for Economic Planning Agency, and their immediate aides stayed there. Almost everybody else including Japanese newspaper people, press people, stayed in another hotel somewhere around here. And the interpreters and the airline people and the KDD people stayed in another hotel at this corner. I was trying to find out where some of the officials were staying, and I was told they're staying. その人たちは笠間屋に泊まってますよ。That's what they said, 笠間屋。So maybe it sounded like a Japanese 温泉旅館ね。ね、it sounds like 笠間屋, but it was actually 笠間屋, the house of Maya. No, they should really pronounce it 笠間屋, but everybody say 笠間屋, 笠間屋. And the conference was at the Cancan Sheraton. By the way, the pronunciation for the word Cancun, which is the name of this village, is with accent here. There is an accent mark. I don't know what they call it in Spanish. It's a French accent aigu, and it's called Cancun. It's not Cancun, it's Cancun. The hotel I stayed at was, I'm sure many of you know Spanish, Camino Real. What does this mean? 王様の部屋。not 部屋。道。部屋はカメラ。でしょ？カメラ。Camera is a room. Camino is a road or street. Little street is called Caminito. There's a tango called Caminito. Real means 王様の。in English it would be royal. Actually, these place names are always interesting. There are places with this name in Canada. Montreal. Montreal. This is French. This part is 王様の. Mont is French for mountain. That's Royal Mountain. I think in German there are similar place names. Kaiser something. Kaiser? Kaiserstuhl. Does it mean King's Mountain? Königsstuhl. Yeah, that's more like Montreal. And in Mexico, there's a place called Monterrey. And that's also same. It's in Spanish, it becomes Monterrey. Monterrey. In California, there's Monterrey. In south of San Francisco, Monterrey. That means 王様の山. Everything is same. Monterrey, Montreal. And this is 王様の道, Camino Real. In California, around Stanford University, there's a road called El Camino Real. Okay. There is an aerial photo, a postcard of this sandy strip. And I'm going to circulate this so you can look at it in the meantime. I brought some visual aids to make my talk more interesting. The conference room itself was small. It accommodated 22 delegations. The 22 countries participated in Cancan Summit. Each delegation consisted of only 4 people. No more than 4 could attend the conference at any one time. Mostly, these were the top person from that country, president or the prime minister, or sometimes foreign minister, when president or prime minister could not come. And then a couple other ministers and a principal official who is an assistant. In Japan's case, you know Mr. Suzuki, Zenko Suzuki went, and foreign minister Mr. Sonoda, and the Minister of State and Director General of Economic Planning Agency, Mr. Komoto. And the fourth man was Mr. Kikuchi, who is called Gaimu Shingikan. In English translation, it is Deputy Foreign Minister. Do you know Mr. Komoto's nickname? Warawan Denka. You know why? You know why he's called Warawan Denka? Do you know why? Because he doesn't smile? Actually, before the war, or during the Pacific War, there was a prince in Thailand, a Thai prince, whose name was Prince Warawang. That's why. Yes, he was called Warawang Denka. So it's the name of a real person. People of my age group, some of you remember Warawang Denka. But most of you young people nowadays never heard of this real Prince Warawang. But that's why it's called Warawang Denka. Otherwise, there's no reason to call him Denka. He's not a prince. But Komoto-san actually he's a very nice person. He just rarely smiles. This very thick, what would you call it? It's not a book. It's not a brochure. It's a document, a piece of document. Is a list of participants. List of participants. The people who attend conferences are called delegates or participants. Delegates sound very official. Some of the minor officials accompanying these delegations may not be called delegates. Because, for example, an interpreter is not called a delegate. Interpreters are not delegates. Secretaries are not delegates. Stenographers. But they may be still participants. Participants are the people who participate in a conference or in an event. So participants can be anybody. Delegates are more important people. So this is the list of participants, listing them by country and by titles, beginning with the top person. The first, this is in English. All the documents for Cancan Summit were prepared in 3 languages: English, French, and Spanish. Spanish is the country of the language of the host country, Mexico. I only picked up the English one because I couldn't read others. They were of no use to me anyway. And the countries are in English alphabetical order. The Spanish copy lists all the countries in Spanish alphabetical order. Likewise, the French would list the countries in French alphabetical order. They're quite different, you know. In English, the first country is Algeria. Since to read these small prints, I need glasses. The delegate, the chief delegate from Algeria was President Chadli. Yeah, these names and countries are interesting. So let's list them. Algeria is President Chadli. Many delegates. About 30, or more than 30 people. 4 pages. About 33, 34 people. Next comes Austria. Never to be confused with Australia. Austria is in Europe. The Prime Minister of Austria is called in English Chancellor, like the German Prime Minister Schmidt. The Chancellor of Austria was Kreisky. Mr. Kreisky could not come. He had a pneumonia, 肺炎になっちゃったね。But Chancellor Kreisky and Mexican president were the architects, 建築家の architects are the people who designed and built this conference. Lopez Portillo, President Portillo and Chancellor Kreisky are the real architects of this North-South summit. But Kreisky couldn't come, so Austria sent Minister of Foreign Affairs, foreign minister. His name is Paar, P-A-H-R. Austria has a very small delegation, 8 or 9 people. Then comes Bangladesh. Bangladesh. You know what this means? This is Bengal. Bangladesh means land of Bengali. ベンガル人の国がバングラデシュね。And the Prime Minister, was he Prime Minister? Yes. Rahman. There are many Rahmans. A few years ago, Prime Minister Rahman was assassinated. Bangladesh sent about 10, 11 people. Brazil, President of Brazil could not come, and on his behalf came the Minister of Foreign Minister, Guerreiro, as personal and special representative of the President of the Republic. Brazil, all right, about 12 people. Canada, the famous Mr. Trudeau, my favorite world leader. Because Kreisky could not come, that is, Mr. Trudeau and Portillo, President Portillo, acted as the co-chairman, two co-chairmen. It turned out that Mr. Trudeau was a fantastic co-chairman. He really was effective, as well as graceful, charming, as usual. I noticed he didn't have a flower on his lapel this time because he wasn't wearing a jacket. Very few people wore jackets. They are all in sport coats. All right, I'll, in the meantime, circulate some of the pictures. Toward the end of the second day, the last session, the fourth session, the concluding session was delayed while people were still trying to work out a compromise, 妥協, on the language of the co-chairman's report. There was no communique, no formal statement, but two co-chairmen would announce this co-chairman's summary to the press and therefore to the world in their own responsibility. But there was one very delicate part which you probably read in the newspapers about so-called global negotiations, GN, 国連包括交渉, it is called, global negotiations. They took about 3 hours to finally agree on the language. In the meantime, all the interpreters were waiting in the booths. While I was waiting, I took several pictures, and I don't think it was prohibited, because I did carry my camera, and nobody stopped me. And when I put my camera and clicked the shutter, people saw me, and I wasn't stopped. So why don't you circulate? I want these back to me eventually, those postcards and pictures. So Canada was Trudeau, and Chile, China. Chile wasn't there. So what is the, so China, Prime Minister Jiang, was that Jiang? No. Ciao. Ciao. No, there are the people in the Chinese class. I think in English it's spelled like this, right? And how do you pronounce it? Huh? What? Ciao. Ciao Zuyang. Very difficult. I always thought it was Jiao Zuyang. It is これでしょうの蝶ね。それから紫でしょ。ね。それから太陽のようですね。日本イコール超仕様。So that's a friend from China. China sent many delegations. 2 pages, 2 full pages. So, 3 pages. About 15, 16 people. There were 4 interpreters from China, and I'll tell you about these interpreters later. In France, of course, President Mitterrand. Big delegations. No, not big. No, about 12 people. Germany. Of course, there are 2 Germanys. This is called Federal Republic of Germany. ドイツ連邦共和国. The other one is called Democratic German Democratic Republic. GDR. That's right. GDR. That's East Germany. This is Federal Republic of Germany. Here again, Chancellor Schmidt had to have a heart surgery. I think he had a pacemaker installed, so he could not come. And Germany sent Foreign Minister Genscher. Foreign Minister Genscher, who always attends these summit meetings of the industrial nations. Anyway, the 7 Nations Summit, like Ottawa. All right, 3 pages. Guyana. Guyana is in South America, right? Yeah. It's a former British colony. Guyana is where they had the what? People's Temple. The wholesale suicide about a year ago of a couple hundred people. Guyana. That is what put Guyana on the world map. That's the expression you use. That is what made Guyana famous. That's what put Guyana on the world map, unfortunately. That was President Burnham. A very English-sounding name, about 10 people. Then India. Who came from India? Prime Minister Gandhi. Mrs. Gandhi, that is. Indira Gandhi. First name is Indira. Indira Gandhi. About a dozen people. Ivory Coast. Zonge Kaigan. From Africa. Foreign Affairs. Foreign Minister Ake. That's his name, Ake. Very small delegation, 7 people. So I'm going by alphabetical order. Suppose in Japan, if you list these countries by Iroha-jun, how would you call Iroha-jun in English? Alphabetical order. I didn't invent it. It was Mr. Komatsu who said that. He was interpreting simultaneously. When somebody was explaining, この名前はイロハ順で並んでおります。Mr. Komatsu said, names are arranged in alphabetical order. I think it's a fantastic translation. That's what he should have done, and that's what he did. And if the foreign delegates are confused, let them ask questions. They should ask questions. Excuse me, I need some clarification. What is alphabetical order? And then whoever said it first should explain. The Iroha is a Japanese alphabet. And then comes Japan. of course, our Suzuki-san. Big delegation. 1, 2, 3 pages. Without listing the interpreters, that's the 3 pages. 官房副長官ね、それから総理大臣秘書官、それから外務省の局長さん2、3人、通産省の局長、経済企画省の局長さん、etc., etc., 農林水産省の局長さん。Then, after Japan comes Mexico, and President is Jose Lopez Portillo, or Portillo, Mexicans call him. Not many. 3 pages. Nigeria, another African country, black country, President Shagari, I think, Shagari. It's usually these small countries that send big delegations. 2 pages. Philippines. Always Philippines in plural, always. President Marcos. Ferdinand Marcos. Not many, but 8 people. Saudi Arabia. Very important country. The moderate Arab country, right? Onken hane. Saudi Arabia. From Saudi Arabia came Prince Fahad. Fahad. That's a difficult name to pronounce. Fahad. Sometimes it is spelled with an H here. His official title is Deputy Prime Minister and Crown Prince. He is 副総理。そして he is 皇太子。Crown Prince is like Crown Prince Charles, the next emperor or next king. So he is the successor. Crown Prince Fahad in the Arabian robe. Wow, 3 pages. Sweden. Sweden sent Prime Minister Fälldin. F-E-L-L-D-I-N. There's an umlaut over Fälldin, about 10 people. And Tanzania. Tanzania was most interesting. Tanzania is a big, important African country, and the president of Tanzania is a very famous man, Julius Nyerere. Julius Nyerere. He's actually a scholar. I think he studied at Oxford or Cambridge, classics. And he translated almost all of the Shakespeare's works into Swahili language. So, very vocal person. I'm sure he appeals to his people tremendously. He spoke a lot. I cannot tell you what he said, but I can tell you how he spoke. He spoke very passionately, waving his hands and pointing his finger at many people. Julius Nyerere. It's very interesting. Tanzania is a member of the British Commonwealth. And a few weeks ago, there was a Commonwealth conference in Melbourne, Australia. You remember. And Mrs. Thatcher, Pierre Trudeau, Indira Gandhi, Julius Nyerere, and all these people were meeting there. And many of them are on first name basis. You know, when you say you are on the first name basis, お互いに first name で呼び合う仲, very friendly. Mrs. Thatcher would say, Julius. Kind of cute, Julius. And Mr. Trudeau calls him Julius. I think when this Julius acts like a little brat, ね、わがままな子供, these people say, oh, Julius, they try to calm him down, I think. 微笑ましい. And then after Tanzania comes United Kingdom. The Great Britain is officially called the United Kingdom of Great Britain, Scotland, Wales, something. The real name for that country is very long. United Kingdom of, who knows it for sure? Great Britain, Scotland, and Northern Ireland or something. And these are several kingdoms that are united. Anyway, it's called the UK, not England. To call that country England is not polite because that excludes Scotland and it excludes Wales. It excludes Northern Ireland. So you should call that country UK, United Kingdom. Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher. Maggie Thatcher. Okay. About a dozen people. Then comes USA. President Reagan. The other delegates from the United States were Secretary of State Haig, a very controversial man, military man, and Secretary of Treasury, whose name is spelled exactly the same and pronounced Reagan. He's the Zaimu Chokan, Secretary of Treasury. He is Reagan. President is Reagan. President Reagan was actually Reagan when he was a movie star. He was called Ronald Reagan. But when he became governor of California, he decided to change his public image. So he announced, from now on, I want to be called Reagan. Okay. And while the presidential campaign was going on a year ago, the Japanese newspaper still used to write Reagan, Reagan. And some people pointed it out, it should really be Reagan. I, for one, insisted that it should be Reagan. So altogether, I think the Japan Newspaper Association, Nihon Shimbun Kyokai, after many meetings, decided to change it. And then everybody had to change it. USA. Many delegates, about 30 people. Venezuela. Venezuela sent President Campins, Herrera Campins. Campins is president. 10 people. Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia, it's pronounced. Sent President I can't even pronounce it. In English, it'd be Krega, but I know it was pronounced differently. It was something like Kraiger. Finally, from the United Nations, Secretary General Waldheim. He was 23rd man. All right, that's a list of delegates. Why don't you circle? While I was traveling, I was taking some notes, but not about the contents, because it is a closed-door conference. Nothing should be leaked. Interpreter should not tell other people but what went on. Interpreter should not take notes of the substance. I was taking notes of the order of the country in which they spoke. They did not speak in this order. They spoke in Spanish alphabetical order. And then they drew lottery, kujibiki, to decide who shall be the first. The first speaker was Prince Fahad. I think was decided previous night. So as the first speaker, Prince Fahad came well prepared. He had his manuscript in Arabic. Therefore, of course, he spoke in Arabic. It was interpreted into English by some Arabic interpreters who came with the Saudi Arabian delegation, I think. And then we took delay. We interpreted that English into Japanese. Here are my notes, which show the order and some of the interesting words or expressions they used. I jotted down these interesting words and expressions, but without context, 文脈なしに. So there's no secret here. Newspaper people may like to see it, but they can't tell a thing from this. I'll tell you about some of the interesting expressions they used. You know who spoke first? Actually, unofficially. The meeting was to start at 10 o'clock in the morning. But 10 minutes before 10, do you know who spoke? It was Mr. Suzuki. Do you know why? I was responsible. I was testing the microphone. I wanted to make sure that my clients, お客様, the Japanese delegation, could hear the translation, Japanese channel, well. Instead of saying 本日は晴天なり, which is very ridiculous, everybody knows it's a fine weather today. And I said, I opened this microphone, I turned the switch on and said, I wrote down exactly what I said, because this was a historical incident. 日本語の同時通訳です。総理、聞こえておりますか? No, I said more politely, I think. そうそう。総理、よく聞こえておりましょうか? That's what I said. 日本語の同時通訳です。総理、よく聞こえておりましょうか? Then Mr. Suzuki said, よく聞こえますよ. But for some strange reason, his microphone was on. I don't know why. All the microphones were off. His microphone was on. And when he said, よく聞こえますよ, and he nodded, and I heard him loud in my earphone. That means all other interpreters heard him in Japanese. I don't know what happened in other booths, but they must have been confused. But that was 10 minutes before the official opening of the conference. So actually, in Cancun, Mr. Suzuki was the first speaker, unofficially. That's a secret. Only Mr. Suzuki and I know. Then you read in newspapers, and therefore this is no secret, that the American delegation was late. There are various reports. Some say they were late by 13 minutes. Others say 15 minutes. Newsweek, I think, said 14 minutes. 14 minutes. My note says 14 minutes. I know, it's Seiko time. I know it's very accurate. It was unbelievable. It was round seats, round table, and there were booths, interpreted booths here, and the Mexican president, Portillo, Pierre Trudeau, and starting from Saudi Arabia, no, not from Saudi Arabia, no, Algeria, etc. Two principals on the front row, Prime Minister and Foreign Minister, or President and Foreign Minister, and the two others behind. So for example, somewhere around here was Mr. Suzuki, Prime Minister, and Mr. Sonoda, and Mr. Komoto, and Mr. Kikuchi, 外務審議官, Deputy Foreign Minister. So on the second day, these two gentlemen changed seats. I don't know why. Maybe Mr. Sonoda had 1 o'clock. Everybody was there. And of course, as I said, it was 10 minutes before 10 that Mr. Suzuki said, はい、よく聞こえますよ。よく聞こえますよ。At 10 o'clock, there was nobody here. There were 4 people. I couldn't believe my eyes. I said, what? And I asked my 2 colleagues, the other 2 interpreters, who are Mrs. Matsumoto Junko and Miss Harada Yukari, whose picture is here. A lot of things to do. Thank you. They do come back. And I said, いないよ。あらま。And it was about 40 minutes after 10 that they came up. There are many accounts, many stories in newspapers. I have read many of them. I try to find out what really happened. Some say Reagan had some meeting with the Austrian foreign minister, and the elevator was stuck or something. It may have been the reason. There were only 2 elevators in that Sheraton hotel. They're very slow, and they would take only 1 head of state or head of government at the time, and his assistants. Do you know the difference between head of state and head of government? No, they're different. Head of state is 国家元首. 元首. In Japan, it's the emperor. In the United States of America, it is the president. And head of government, so in Japan, it's prime minister. In America, Mr. Reagan is also head of government. He's head of state and head of government in one person. In Great Britain or in United Kingdom, Queen is the head of state. Mrs. Thatcher is only head of government. Prime Minister Trudeau is head of government. Who is Canada's head of state? Queen Elizabeth. Who is head of state of Australia? Queen Elizabeth. I don't know about India now. It used to be Queen. Maybe still today. I don't know. But when they came, Mr. Reagan came in maroon-colored sports shirt, and I was surprised that there was no apology. They just walked in, sat down. In the meantime, for about first 15 minutes, President Portillo let the photographers in to take pictures. So there was actually no talk, no discussion. And one group of photographers came in, they left, and second group came in, and when the third group was taking pictures, that's when Reagan and the American Party walked in. The first speaker, of course, was President Lopez Portillo, who is a very handsome man. I took his picture at the airport when he came out to send off President and Prime Minister Suzuki. His Suzuki-san and Portillo, Mr. Portillo, walking together. I also circulate these pictures. He spoke in Spanish. A long speech was printed and translated in English and French. And we were, of course, listening to the English translation to translate into Japanese. There are many booths, and somewhere around here, I think the end booth was Swedish, Swedengo. And next was Japanese. I don't know what was next around here, but somehow there was French, German, and of course Spanish. And there was the language of Yugoslavia, Serbo-Croatian, Serbo-Croatia, that's what we call it. Anyway, Serbo-Croatian. And somewhere around here was Chinese, and Arabic. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Of course, German. Is that all? In French, yeah. English, French, German, Spanish. No Russian, of course. And for the Japanese Prime Minister's opening statement, in the first day, in the morning, all 22 delegates spoke, 22 speeches. They all finished them by about 1:30. It was amazing. Mr. Suzuki had his speech prepared with last-minute changes the night before, and I had it in English translation, translated by Simon International actually, but with Gaimisho's changes, and I was supposed to read it without any change. There are 2 or 3 places where I felt the English expression was a little clumsy. Oh, it's a very convenient word. A few sentences were clumsy, and I told my friends in Gaimisho that they don't sound right. They don't make good sense. They don't quite convey the meaning. Shouldn't we change them? And the reply from our Gaimisho friends was, well, this is supposed to be official translation. But whatever you do as an interpreter is up to you. So this way, he has no responsibility. He can always say, oh, I didn't approve it. The interpreter changed it. But that's all right. I know these people and they know me. I know they trust me. So I said, all right, I'll change them. So I did change them so that those 2 or 3 parts would make better sense when other people hear it in English. Then, because I had the English text of the Prime Minister's speech, I made a few corrections, and with the approval of Gaimisho, I made a few copies and gave them to colleagues, Doryo, in other booths, because I want them to be sure to translate them correctly. It is in Japan's interest to give these copies to all the interpreters beforehand. And this I suggested to Gaimisho. And actually, Gaimisho people themselves gave copies to other interpreters. But then that morning, I made a few last-minute changes. I went into every booth and said, hello, I'm the Japanese interpreter. There are going to be these few changes. And I told the people in each booth. And everybody was very appreciative. And Arabic interpreters say, oh, thank you very much. And Chinese colleagues were very friendly. And when I tried to open this door, the last booth, people inside tried to close the door. They actually pushed it to push me out. So I said, I tried to push in, they tried to push me out. I knocked it, and somebody gave me a dirty look. And I said, I need you. And I said, this is the Japanese Prime Minister's text. There are corrections. And do you have the Japanese text? They said, no. I said, well, I must get you a copy. And they pushed me out. And there was no more time. I had to go back to my booth. Later, I asked the chief interpreter or somebody who was a coordinator for all these booths, who are they in that booth? She said, shh, they're President Portillo's relatives. 大統領の親戚. Anyway, 2 or 3 people who were obviously not interpreters were there. I don't know if they are just listening or taking notes or tape recording the whole session. I don't know. Interesting things happened. While President of Mexico was speaking in Spanish, very fast, I was surprised to note Prime Minister Trudeau was not wearing his earphones, meaning he understands Spanish. It was amazing. Man of many talents. Trudeau understands Spanish. After a very formal opening speech by President Portillo, co-chairman Mr. Trudeau spoke completely off the cuff. Off the cuff. Cuff. わかります? Cuff ってのはカフスね。カフスがないってのはそんなにね、要するに気取らないでね。Off the cuff ってのは without any paper. Extemporaneously. 即席で。It was a beautiful performance. He wasn't even looking at any notes. He just looked at the people and spoke very comfortably. He's a very capable man. And then, according to the lottery, Prince Fahad was the first one. So in the Spanish alphabetical order, it comes to Saudi Arabia, and Algeria, Austria, Bangladesh, Brazil, Ivory Coast, etc. I wrote an order and made notes of some of the interesting observations I made. Trudeau spoke off the cuff, and the Austrian Foreign Minister, Mr. Parr, spoke in English for this opening session. But being a German speaker, he has some accent. When he says a word like summit, it comes out as summit. That's a habit of the German-speaking people. A certain, I should say only certain, delegate from some Asian country pronounced the word bargain. Bargain. We didn't come here to negotiate. We didn't come here to bargain. But this is a kind of accent that we interpreters must live with. It's a fact of life. The Chinese Prime Minister, of course, spoke in Chinese. It was, I think, well prepared. And our colleagues in the Chinese booth, one of them, there were two men and two women. The oldest man, a portly gentleman, was English-French interpreter, Chinese-French interpreter. He was interpreting Chinese into French. And there was a middle-aged woman whose shape was like this, and she looked like a inaka no shogakko no sensei. Very friendly, very courteous, and one relatively young man, maybe about 30, 35, and a woman slightly younger. They're very polite, but they don't speak very much. Maybe they're not used to these situations. They mean well, but they don't ask us questions. We only exchange greetings. Good morning, how are you? Nico nico. And that's about all. They don't ask us, for example, when did you arrive? Or how many of are you here? Or do you also handle French or German? They don't ask any questions. So we don't want to be asking all the questions. I ask a few questions. Do you take French into Chinese? I say no, only from English. But that was about end of our conversation. And during coffee breaks, they were around, but probably they didn't want to associate too much with other people. Or maybe simply they are not used to these international conferences. But they were the same people I learned who went to Cancun last August for preparatory meeting of the foreign ministers, Junbi Kaigi, to which our Mr. Komatsu and two other interpreters went. Apparently they were the same interpreters. This Chinese interpreter who was interpreting the Chinese Prime Minister into English spoke very good English, beautiful, except he had this Chinese habit of not pronouncing the last consonant, like G or D, when these consonants come at the end of the word. For example, the word like trend, T-R-E-N-D, only comes out as trend. Trend. That last D cannot be heard. And yes, when he said, it goes without saying, yuma demo naku, it came out as it goes without saying, no G. But once you get used to this Chinese accent, it's not difficult to guess the meanings. Since time is running short, let me just circulate a few other pictures. These were taken at the airport as we were leaving. Prime Minister Suzuki and the picture of airport, and me, a friend of mine, took this picture. And I didn't, of course, get onto this plane. So please circulate these pictures. This was when the honor guard, the 儀仗兵, honor guards were firing the guns. They call it howitzers, a kind of cannon, 大砲ね. 21 salute, 21 gun salute, it's called. 21 salute, 21発大砲撃つのは, that's for the head of state. I think for head of government it's something like 19. I don't know. If it's just me, no gun. But maybe for foreign minister, maybe 15 or something. And this was as they are firing the salute. President Marcos of the Philippines, who speaks English, of course, and English is really his first language. I'm sure he speaks Tagalog, the local language. But to everybody's surprise, he spoke in Spanish. Many of the educated Filipinos, particularly the upper class Filipinos, have good knowledge of Spanish because the Philippines were a Spanish colony. But I understand that among these Filipinos, Spanish is a status symbol. It's not a practical language. Even though many of the Filipinos have beautiful Spanish names, the people's names, they don't understand a word of Spanish. I even know a few more words of Spanish than most of them know. But to everybody's surprise, Marcos started speaking Spanish. So what you do is, in our booth, we turn the dial or switch to the English channel. Normally our dial is on the floor language. Floor language is the original language. Whatever is spoken on the floor or in the room. If somebody suddenly talks in Swahili, I hear Swahili. But the Swahili was not used. So when the Chinese is spoken, when the Spanish is spoken, I turn the dial or switch to the English channel to hear the English interpretation. And I interpret, we interpret, three of us, as I said, two other women interpreters from Simon. We take turns and we interpret whatever you hear in English into Japanese. So we turned to English, but no English translation was coming. Waited, and nothing was coming. And I saw Reagan worried, and I saw Alexander Haig. Everybody's doing. And of course, poor Mr. Suzuki. So we had to inform him. 英語の通訳、スペイン語から英語の通訳が入っておりませんので恐れ入りますが、日本語に訳せません。少々お待ちください。That's what we said. And we all went out to the corridor behind the booth and looked into the English booth. There was nobody there in the Spanish booth. Somebody there should have been interpreting from Spanish into English, but there was nobody. I think that was very bad. I think they are local interpreters, Mexican people. The technical level of interpreters in that country of Mexico is unfortunately very low. The reason is they are a protected country. Protectionism. Same as in 保護貿易主義. Protection is bad. They like to protect the local interpreters by keeping other interpreters out. They don't bring European interpreters. They don't bring North American interpreters. They like to give opportunities to local interpreters. It's all right to encourage locals. But if they have no competition, they do not improve. Competition is the spice of life, as the saying goes. Spice. 香辛料ね。香料。味付け。Spice of life. Competition makes life spicy. Competition is the spice of life. If there's no competition to Simon, we lose incentive to improve. Because there is some competition, some, not very much. We try to stay ahead of them. I don't compete in terms of skill and performance with other interpreters. Naturally, there are people who I respect, and in many ways I admire their interpreting. I wish I can do in many ways, as well as some of the other people do, because everyone has some strengths and weaknesses. I have my own weaknesses, and I like to improve that aspect. Anyway, those interpreters, Mexican interpreters, I think were lazy. They simply assumed Marcos would speak in English. And the Spanish those both interpreters working into English weren't there. That was very bad. For about 2 minutes, I wrote it. スペインから英語通訳入ってこず、約2分。And when it came, it was very bad English. Very poor interpreting. And Mr. Marcos soon switched to English. I think he actually planned to do it anyway. I wondered why he spoke in Spanish. I assumed that he did it out of courtesy to the host country. A nice gesture, nice gesture. The president of Guyana, that black South African, I suppose it's black, yeah, country, spoke in English. Beautiful English. Obviously, British educated. Mrs. Gandhi of India had a very pretty, attractive, feminine voice and very nice English. Well educated. It wasn't typical Indian. Mr. Suzuki, of course, spoke in Japanese, and I did his part into English. Nigeria spoke English. Mrs. Thatcher, of course, same kind of English we are all used to. High-pitched, metallic voice. It's not very nice, but you get used to it. The Swedish Prime Minister spoke in Swedish, and the Swedish into English interpreting was not very good, unfortunately. And the Yugoslavia spoke Serbo-Croatian. We had to change it, of course, but every time we switch to English, we must make sure to put it back to the original channel, because sometimes in conferences, suddenly a Japanese delegate speaks. If you are on the English channel, you don't hear the Japanese speaker, so you can't interpret. So you should always put it back to the original channel, and only when you don't understand that original language, you should put it back to English. I have to do it. We have to do it very frequently. The German spoke German. Wartime of United Nations spoke English. On the second day, there was one brief intervention by Prime Minister Suzuki. Intervention is a technical term used in international conference. The intervention does not mean 介入 or ちょっかいを出す. Intervention means 発言, to intervene. Does anyone wish to make an intervention? It means does anyone wish to speak? Intervention. It's not used normally. Americans don't use it. In conferences in America, they don't use a word like interventions. I think it's of European origin. But intervention does mean 発言. Mr. Suzuki made a brief intervention, and when he was finished, Mr. Trudeau, acting as chairman, then said, ありがとうございました. In Japanese, yeah. Trudeau is cute. He's very clever. Yeah, very nice. I think I told you right after Ottawa summit that in one place when they were discussing the joint statement, the communique, Mr. Trudeau said, is this all right with Mr. Prime Minister Suzuki? And Mr. Suzuki said, はい、OK です. And of course, the interpreter, that time Mr. Yokota, interpreted simultaneously as, that's okay, yes, that's okay with me. Prime Minister Trudeau heard his original Japanese because they were sitting just across a small table, not as big table as this. And because he said, はい、OK です. Mr. Trudeau said, there's one Japanese word that I understood. So this time he did it again. ありがとうございました. In the past tense. Very clever man. In these conferences, people use big words. And some of the words are difficult to pronounce. It must be amusing to you that a certain head, a native English speaker, could not pronounce the word replenishment very well. Replenishment. これ消すものどこ一緒？あ、here we are. Replenish is 補充するでしょ。Replenishment here means 資本を足りない資本を増やすこと、増資。It's not used normally. When the company, certain business company wants to increase its capital, 資本金, they don't use the word replenishment. But for the World Bank or IMF or IDA, what is IDA? International Development Association or 第二世銀, you talk about IDA replenishment. It's a 増資. This delegate, she tried to say it again. For the second time, she failed, and it came out only the third time, replenishment. So it's comforting to us that even those native speakers sometimes stumble over difficult words. I made note of some of the words used here, and this shows you the range of vocabulary used by the summit meetings. Like this word regime, which comes from French. Regime means 政権とかね。しかし、it is often used to mean 制度, system or institution. Regime. Someone used a beautiful word, ethos. What is ethos? Anyone? Ethos って何ですか? Someone should know. これ日本語でエトスというでしょ。It's a Greek word. エトス。When it came, I translated it as その民族の精神構造。精神構造。その民族のね、日本人の心なんてのはイーソスというふうに。Funny word. Deforestation was all right. Deforestation is forest is 森。森がダメになることね。森が枯れること。But that was all right. But when somebody used desertification, I was really surprised. I never had heard it before. Desert. This is 砂漠でしょ Desert. Not what you eat after meal. That's one S. Desertification. 砂漠化。だんだん土地が荒れて不毛になってしまうことね。砂漠化。But apparently that's a technical term. I should imagine that it should be desertization or something. Desertization. But it's desertification. I don't like it, but it's English. The word platitude was used. Platitude. 平凡な言葉ね。ありふれた陳腐な言葉。Platitudes. There was a big one, Latin word. Desideratum. 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 What is desideratum? Desideratum. 望ましいこと。Desire. Desired thing というんですよね。Desideratum. Of course, the plural is desiderata. You can see it's very important to have good vocabulary. Because if you miss this one word, you may miss the whole idea. Desideratum. Desideratum. I think it was Trudeau who used this word. Opulence. Opulence means 豊富、たっぷりあるね。These people being very educated use many imported words like クルドゥサック。Qu'est-ce que c'est? クルドゥサック。袋小路。ね。クルドゥサック。Dead end street. On the other hand, sometimes people use rather colloquial expressions like skittish. Skittish. You can look it up in the dictionary, skittish. It's a kind of word you wouldn't expect to hear in a summit. But in some very informal moment, some people use words like this. This is a Mexican calendar. I think it's actually Aztec calendar. This is a souvenir piece that I bought, not this time, but about 3 years ago when I went to IMF meeting in Mexico City. You hang it on the wall, and this is supposed to have all sorts of things on it. This is supposed to be a very, very scientific calendar. Trouble is nobody can read it. Those Aztecs have this superstition about this serpent, heavy. This is also an ornamental piece you hang on the wall. Again, I bought this 4 years ago in Mexico. If you would read some of the articles like Newsweek, the current issue of Newsweek with this cover, and Time magazine, they have very good detailed accounts of this summit. Reagan, before the formal opening, Reagan cracked jokes, to crack jokes is 冗談を言う, cracked jokes about Latin tardiness. ね、ラテンアメリカ、ラテン系の人が時間に遅れるということについて冗談を言っておきながら、then offended his fellow summiteers by arriving late for the first serious gathering of the world leaders. Ronald Reagan, in his burgundy polo shirt, yeah, burgundy is the name of the color, burgundy in wine color, burgundy polo shirt. Mexican President Jose Lopez Portillo in a high-necked formal guayabera, I think that's a Spanish name for his Mexican dress, and Mrs. Gandhi won sari, rather a quiet traditional sari. Yeah, the Mexicans privately made much of the small matter of Reagan's 14-minute tardiness at the first meeting. Tardiness, 遅れたね、first meeting. The Mexicans private, 内輪で made much of っていうのはto play it up 問題にすると。The Mexicans privately made much of the small matter っていうのはささやかなこと。Small matter of Reagan's 14-minute tardiness at the first meeting. 第1回全体会議で14分遅れた、レーガン14分遅れたという些細なことを、内々ではメキシコの人たちはだいぶ問題にしておった。I don't think it's small matter actually. I think it's rather impolite. At least he could have apologized. Sorry, we were stuck in the elevator or something. No, I'm sure if the Japanese party was late, the Japanese Prime Minister would apologize very sincerely. 大変失礼いたしました。And I'll do my best to translate that sincerely. Yes, it talks about the socialist president, Julius Nyerere. Yes, he's a socialist. A philosopher who has translated Shakespeare into Swahili, lectured Reagan. レーガンに説教するんですね。サブ SUBTLY. We are here talking about poverty and starvation, not about the internal affairs of any of our countries. つまり自分の国がインフレだとか不況だからそんな話して聞きに来たんじゃないと。アメリカが今不況だから援助ができない、そんな話聞きたいんじゃないんだと。We are here to talk about starvation and hunger. starvation と hunger は同じことだな。だからそういうこと言うのよくね。みんな興奮して喋ってるときは。Poverty and starvation. それ面白い書いてあるよ。だから私が 何も秘密の話しなくてもみんなこういうとこ書いてあるよね、よく読めばね。このそう今回ね、このレーガンにとって勉強になったはずだというんですね。A Yugoslav representative described the summit as a learning process for レーガン。レーガンさんのお勉強になった。In which the poor countries politely explained, Mr. President, what you want doesn't work. We have to find another way. A Brazilian official best summed up the third world mood, third world, 第三世界 that means developing countries, 開発途上国の気持ち best summed up the third world mood. Our expectations were so modest that disappointment can't be too great. 初めからあんまり期待もしてなかったから、今度の会議に失望もそんなに大きなはずはないよ、ね、Our expectations weren't too great. Our expectations Our expectations were so modest that the disappointment can't be too great. I think that is good summation. Of course, I don't have to lecture you about the meaning of the summit. You are all intelligent people. You can read in Japanese newspapers and magazines and these magazines. But some of these descriptions of the atmosphere, setup, and things would make it more interesting, so that now you want to read more about the summit. I hope you will read. By the way, in the middle of this round table, there was a flower bed, like kadan. The entire space within this circular table was planted with flowers that looked like chrysanthemums. There may be something else, but they were all white and yellow. But to me, being Buddhist, it sounds like, looks like ososhiki. I really liked the little brighter colors, like red or pink. It was all white and yellow. If you like to ask some questions, I have some more time. Any question? Yes. Mr. Suzuki? Of course, he speaks Japanese only. Interpreter, us. Yeah, we interpret Mr. Suzuki into English. Yes, the Chinese interpreters picked up my English. They did not speak Japanese, at least officially. No direct Japanese-Chinese interpreting, no. Via English, by way of English, Japanese, English, Chinese. I think, unless they were not telling truth, I like to believe them. They said, no, we do not interpret from Japanese. We take relay from you. That's what they said. All right. To the person who asked the first question, I'll give you this poster. All right, second question. まだポスターありますよ、したらすみませんが。はい。
How they decide how they should stay in China?
Yes. That's a very good question. I'll give you another poster. Because it's a very good question. I should have explained that at the beginning. These countries were selected by the original architects, Mexican President Portillo and Austrian Chancellor Kreisky. They carefully selected some of the industrialized countries from the north and some developing countries from the south. The south here does not necessarily mean geographical south. The south means the third world. 6 of the 7 nations normally attending the summit meeting of the advanced industrialized countries were invited. You know who was not invited? Italy. I understand Italians were very upset. But Italy is a kind of baby among the 7. So Italy was not invited. From Southeast Asia, only I think the Philippines was invited. No other ASEAN country. Then Bangladesh and India. And no country came from the Eastern Bloc or the Soviet or Socialist Bloc. The Soviets were invited. They refused. They refused. Cuba wanted to come in. The United States refused. President Reagan said, "We will not go to Cancun if Cuba comes." He insisted. And Mexico, which has always been a kind of big brother to Cuba, which has protected Cuba and looked after that little itazurako, little brat, wanted Cuba in order actually to make Cuba more moderate. But Reagan made the very tough condition of excluding Cuba. If not, we won't go. So somehow I think Mexico had to persuade the Cubans to すまねえが今度は泣いてくれ。It's some sort of 何が節 I think. その代わり I'll look after your interest. I don't know. Anyway, Cuba didn't come. So the whole Eastern Bloc was conspicuously absent. Conspicuously absent. いないということが目立ってるわけね。いなくても目立たない人もいるけど、いないと目立つな。So some people call this, instead of 南北サミット, it's 南西サミット。南と西だけだと。東がないと。はい。Another question? はい。
Could you tell me about the North South Forum? We expect to know. I expect to know about how connecting to new international economic.
NEO, New International Economic Order.
Yes.
New International Economic Order, NIEO, or sometimes pronounced NEO, which doesn't sound nice. Meow sounds like an and cats mewing. NIEO has a political connotation, 政治的な意味合い. Because NIEO is what was advocated by developing countries. Developing countries have been demanding there should be new order, new international economic order. The rich industrial countries should share their wealth with us poor and hungry in the south. And by changing IMF and the World Bank and everything, so that we get more money, more aid, more food. That's NIEO. And the industrial countries don't like that term.
This one I don't know. That is what talks about the North-South Summit. It's kind of the poor country can able to produce other developing countries. Is that what?
Well, as a result of this Cancan Summit, which by the way is what is called, the official title for that summit is an international conference for cooperation and development. I think. Do you have that list of participants somewhere? That thick list? Somewhere. What does it say at the top? I think it says International Conference for International Meeting for on cooperation and development. Thank you. That's the official name. It's not called North-South Summit. And I was asked by Gaimisho people that to translate Namboku Summit, we should say Cancun Summit. Cancun Summit. No, I don't think it will work out really that way. This is beginning of some kind of dialogue whereby the rich nations will probably look after the poor nations a little more than before. Yeah. But I don't think this is going to help the poor nations just overnight. No, it isn't that simple. It's a very difficult problem. You can have a postcard. Read, please, these two latest issues of Newsweek and Time. They have some very good articles. You have? Yes. Right. Actually, I had something more to show. These are T-shirts. Cancan. I bought this for my little girl. Then there wasn't the right size, and everybody was picking up these souvenirs. And this is the only thing left. And this is a little too small for my daughter. And I thought, so maybe my daughter will grow into this. This next bigger size in two more years. And I thought this would be for my son, but I found that he's much bigger than this. So I'm giving this to my wife. Kind of cute. Cancan. This is for the accent. Anything else? No, nothing. Okay, maybe one more question. Last, yes.
I think this is a very silly question, but I don't ask you. The Japanese Prime Minister Suzuki received per diem allowance from the Japanese government during his attendance in
Receive per diem? Per diem? 出張手当. Of course. I'm sure. Yes. Yes, I am sure. Prime Minister, Foreign Minister, and everybody receives per diem allowance. So many yen per day. I think it depends. Amount depends on the rank. Yes. And also there should be some special budget for this kind of trip. But I suppose I'm almost sure that according to the official rules, the Prime Minister is entitled to something like 2万円 or 3万円. I don't know. I have no idea. But I'm sure. Yes. Because he's after a public servant, we cannot expect a Prime Minister to pay for the food and everything out of his own pocket. On the other hand, on a trip like this, seldom you have to pay for your own meal. The lunches and dinners and everything are organized, either paid by the host country, the Mexican government, or the Japanese government. For example, we pay for breakfast. But very often there are free lunches and free dinners. That's how I think government officials save money. Because official per diem, I'm glad you used the good word. Per diem means 出張手当. It's a Latin word for per day. 1日につき. It means allowance for one day. Per diem is very small. So if you go abroad, you really cannot pay for your hotel and 3 meals out of per diem. No. That's a contradiction. But somehow I think these public officials are compensated. Or they are given a lot of free meals. For example, when the plane stopped over in Portland on the way back, the Japanese Consul General, Soryoji, would give dinner to everybody in the delegation, free, of course. So nobody has to pay for the dinner. And they all go to these free meals. I don't like to go to these free meals. But if I'm invited, I think I should be polite, so I go. But I don't look out for free meals. I'd rather eat my own, myself. There, for lunch and dinner, all the three of us, or interpreters, had our own meals separately. It was just as good. Everybody was busy, and there was no dinner parties, luncheons. And in this Sheraton Hotel, where the conference was being held, there was a big dining room for all the participants. The food was served all the time, but you had to pay. And it was expensive, and food wasn't good. The real native Mexican food is good. A lot of Mexican dishes are spicy, and they're good. But once these hotels are Americanized, like the Sheraton Hotel, Camino Real, and Casamaya, they cater to the American taste. And Americans want very bland, B-L-A-N-D, bland, 大味な食べ物ね。They don't like strongly flavored or spicy food. So everybody, all the restaurants go down to the lowest possible level of cuisine. Very bad. And yet, prices were expensive. The lunch I had to eat at the Sheraton Hotel cost me 3,000 yen, 4,000 yen, and it wasn't good at all. Being very curious, I tried to eat different kind of food every time. But, by the way, this is a little pack of sugar I picked up. I pick up a lot of things. From Ottawa Summit, some of you know that I picked up a jar of jelly beans from President Reagan's desk. It was left over. And this is a symbol mark for the Cancan Summit. The north and south interlocking. I'll give you this souvenir for asking me an interesting question. No, I'm sorry, I can't give you these. My family is expecting them back. But maybe time for one more question, and I think we'll close. One more question? Anyone? If not? Okay. So, that's all for this afternoon. I hope you have enjoyed this talk.